The 2018 Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series. Brought to you from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting. The Democratic race for Public Service Commission, District 3. Good afternoon. I'm Drew Dawson, GPB Augusta station manager and midday news anchor and host on 88.5 GPB Atlanta and GPB's statewide network. Welcome to the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series, originating from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting in Atlanta. This is the debate among Democratic candidates for the 3rd District Public Service Commission. Now, for those of you who are not sure what the Public Service Commissioners do, when you turn on the lights, pick up the phone, and cook dinner, your Public Service Commissioners determine the amount you pay for your electricity, telecommunications, and natural gas. Let's meet the candidates. They're in alphabetical order. Lindy Miller is a business executive and co-founder of a renewable energy company that works to give more energy choices to schools, small businesses, and nonprofits. John Noel is a small business owner and former member of the Georgia legislature. And Johnny White is an information technology consultant. Johnny declined to participate in today's debate and will be represented by an empty podium. Now, let's meet our panelists. Molly Samuel is a reporter with WABE 90.1 FM, and Christy Swartz is a reporter for E&E News, covering utility and energy in the Southeast. Now let's get started. For rules on today's debate, please visit the Atlanta Press Club website, atlantapressclub.org. To start the debate, each candidate will be asked one question by one of the panelists. Christy Swartz, you get the first question to Lindy Miller.
Hi.
Hi.
Georgia Power is filing its next long-term energy plan next year, as well as a proposal to adjust rates, likely to pay for whatever they propose in that plan. I saw on your website that you mentioned grid modernization. So what would you like to see in their plan that would move the grid into the future?
Thank you very much, Christy, and thank you all for having us here, to the Atlanta Press Club as well, and to Drew for moderating. Grid modernization has a lot of different meanings around the world, and I think there are many lessons that we're seeing coming out of other jurisdictions. Georgia Power has taken some significant steps around things like smart meters and automating elements of the grid. What we need to do now is take it to the next level. How are we going to use the information that we're able to obtain from those meters? What kinds of critical infrastructure are we going to protect with that smart infrastructure? How are we going to make sure that when we have damaging weather or other things, that our grid is taking us still in a reliable way or serving us in a reliable way?
Molly Samuel, you may now ask John Noel a question.
Why are you opposed to the nuclear expansion at Plant Vogtle?
Because it's too costly, and it doesn't pencil. It doesn't make economic sense. I have been in business now for 19 years. I've been in the energy space for 20. And I understand economics. I've made payrolls, lost money, made money, all these sort of things. When you look at Plant Vogtle, it's quite simple. You have a plant that they told us was going to be $14 billion and done in 6 years. Instead, they're telling us it's double the timeline, double the cost. Funny thing happens when you do that. The math gets worse. And in that intervening time, solar has gotten cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And so we're in this world where all the clean and green technologies are the less expensive ones. And the old school technologies, and nuclear is an old school technology. Ultimately, it is turning a steam turbine. Heating water to turn a turbine. That's old technology. We need to move to a clean and a green future. And this, unfortunately, is a poor way of doing it with money. Vastly more expensive than other alternatives. And we should abandon it now and take our lickings.
Well, that concludes the first portion of the debate. The candidates will now ask a question of their opponent of their choice. And remember, Johnny White declined to participate and is represented by the empty podium, but you can still choose to pose your question to him. Each candidate will have 30 seconds to ask the question, 60 seconds to respond, and 30 seconds for a rebuttal. By random selection, John Noel, you may ask the first question.
Well, thank you. I am going to ask Mr. White a question. So, Mr. White, you qualified at the last moment, and a lot of your paperwork was incorrect. Sorry about that. This was after I testified at the PSC speaking out about Plant Vogtle and the billions of dollars that were wasted there. So my question to you is, did Georgia Power put you up to run to stop my campaign because they're afraid of me? This is very likely going to cause problems, a third candidate in the race.
We'll offer you a 30-second rebuttal at this point.
Oh, my goodness gracious. Mr. White didn't have anything to say. They ought to be afraid. And I think Georgia Power has got a problem. They got a tiger by the tail right here. A lot of people around this state are not happy about their high power bills. They're not happy about that Plant Vogtle expansion cost. They're not happy about the nuclear cost recovery fee that's on their bills. And even if they don't have a nuclear that fee and they don't have Georgia Power, this plant is costing you big money. It needs to stop, and I'll take it to Georgia Power, and I'll lower your bills.
Lindy Miller, you may now ask your question.
Thank you, Drew. I actually have a question for Mr. Noel. I believe we agree very strongly that Vogtle is a disaster, that it is the worst example we've seen of socializing risk and privatizing gains, that every family is paying unprecedented amounts of money in advance for a project that is late and tremendously over budget. And when you're going around, I've been listening to you, you've been saying, I'm going to stop it. I'm going to stick it to Georgia Power. I'm going to stop it. I would like to know whether you believe it's responsible to make those promises to voters.
I think it is not only responsible, I think it is necessary. And I also have heard that you're saying, I think the quote was, that there's no way to stop Vogtle. And I'll find it here in a moment. It will not be shut down, you said recently in Hall County. It must be shut down. And the way to do that is on the PSC to say, we don't have fiat power, but on the PSC to say, you know something? We are going to shift the burden from you, the ratepayers, to them, the shareholders. That shift will have an amazing effect. When their butts are on the line, they'll make a different decision. And unfortunately, the decision they're making right now is not one in our favor because you're on the hook, and that's wrong.
Your rebuttal?
I believe that it is absolutely true that we need a consumer advocate on the commission, that again and again, Chuck Eaton and others on the commission have been rewarding mismanagement on our backs.
Yes.
And yet, every time a decision has been made, it has been made to go forward. You and I were both declined to speak. It has become very clear this project is going forward, and it's incredibly important, I believe, for us to now say, what can we actually do to protect ratepayers? How are we going to protect consumers? That's where I want to focus.
Great.
All right, thank you. For those of us just joining us, this is the debate between the Democratic candidates for the Georgia Public Service Commission District 3. Johnny White declined to participate and is represented by an empty podium. We'll now go back to the panel to ask questions to the candidates of her choice until we run out of time. As a point of moderator privilege, I might also jump in with a question for the candidates, and I'll determine when a rebuttal is appropriate. Christy Swartz, you get the first question in this round.
So this question is for you, Mr. Noel. When I looked through your website, I noticed that you were an early adopter of solar and electric vehicles and are well-versed in energy efficiency.
Yes.
So how are you going to get the state to further transition into renewables and new energy efficiency technologies and other technologies and get around the pushback that likely will include something like this is a mandate or we're already doing enough?
Well, can we agree that everybody likes to save money? And that's the one thing that as a business I've been doing for 20 years is saving people money. And mostly these are commercial customers. But what I noticed when I was in the legislature is I would watch the construction of state buildings, and they were all the low bid for everything. The cheapest air conditioner, the cheapest window. All these things that we know now are stupid decisions. Because if you install a more costly but more efficient air conditioner, it pays for itself quickly. My point is, we need to be adopting efficiency standards. As Public Service Commissioner, I will be promoting that to the legislature and pushing the bill I introduced 10 plus years ago to make all construction lead construction here in Georgia. If it's a state building, it ought to be LEED. And that way we can drive down our operating costs, whether at our homes through energy efficiency projects or at the state level. It's about advocating for that. It's been my passion of 20 years.
Molly Samuel, it's your turn to ask a question.
Ms. Miller, you kind of hinted at what your approach would be on Vogtle if you were on the PSC. But what do you think, if you were elected, you could actually do to protect the ratepayers, as you say you want to do?
Absolutely. Thank you. As I mentioned before, the one thing that is clearly missing right now at the Public Service Commission is a consumer advocate. Who is fighting in the public interest? Who is fighting for you? And when I think about Plant Vogtle and the way our decisions have been made around industry, I believe it's time for us to bring a voice that is rarely channeled and amplified on the commission. I will channel that voice, and I commit to doing that. As well, I think there are things we need to do now to mitigate the risks that are coming down the pipe. We know, as John referenced and Christy referenced in the question, that there is an advanced energy economy coming at us like a train. We need to make sure that in the integrated resource planning process, we are looking at those new technologies and not focusing only on supply, but starting to think about demand. And we need people who know how to connect the dots. I've done that my whole career.
Mm-hmm. Christy Schwartz.
Thank you. We'll go back to you, John. The hearings for Plant Vogtle are open, and the public is invited to speak before each meeting. Georgia Power maintains that they've also been open and transparent through the construction process. Yet a lot of the information they file, such as responses to questions from the PSC staff, are trade secret, so the public cannot see them.
Isn't that interesting?
Does this concern you, and how would you change that?
It concerns me dramatically. The wool has been pulled over too many people's eyes for too long. If Georgia wants a fighter on the commission, somebody who's been in the legislature, who's been in the energy field for 20 years, not 2 years, but a long time, they'll pick me. Because when I get in there, I'll be able to say, that doesn't look right, that doesn't look right, kind of lift up the curtain, look behind the curtain and see what's going on. Georgia Power is misrepresenting a lot of things. These cost overruns are rubber stamped by our opponent every time. We're at 18 or 19 now. Rubber stamps. It is an unfortunate fact that we have to deal with a commission that doesn't have the guts to stand up to Georgia Power, that doesn't have the guts to take it to them. And I think I will do that. I've shown it in the legislature, and I'll show it again.
A rebuttal?
Yes, I think what we need now are not folks who've already served, but folks who bring different skills and different experiences. I think what we've seen in the commission, not just now, but over the last many, many decades, is people roll out of bed and decide to run. We need people who have the skills. I have worked for the last 15 years with governments and companies all around the world to serve citizens more efficiently and effectively. I've helped save not just tens of millions of dollars, but hundreds of millions of dollars and improved services to many people around the world. That is what we need on our commission, the focus on due diligence over multi-billion-dollar decisions. Being an environmentalist is necessary. It is not sufficient.
Christy, another question?
So Ms. Miller,
Yes.
you cannot make people care, but there are plenty of people who do not know what the Public Service Commission does, and they don't even know that Georgia is the only state building a nuclear plant. So how are you going to reach out to people beyond the vocal minority to help them understand what is actually in their electricity bill?
Christy, I'm so glad you asked that because that's what I've been doing for the entirety of my campaign. I assume that we need to speak to voters about the things that matter in our lives. When people are thinking about anything to do with their bills, I guarantee you they're not thinking about the commission. So when I talk to folks, I say something very similar to what Drew said when he opened. From the minute you turn on your light and you turn on your coffee and you turn on your shower for some hot water, it costs you money. And when you start to talk about the things that impact daily lives, when you start to frame it in trade-offs, like schools that I've worked with that are being charged incorrectly, and they say, this is what I could do in education if I weren't paying these bills, you start to generate an interest in a language that is accessible to people. And I truly believe in 2018, this is a time of an appetite for education and engagement exists like never before, where people want to know about the seats that matter in their lives. And this is the perfect seat for that.
Molly, the last question goes to you.
Mr. Noel, do you think Georgia can respond to climate change without nuclear?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I do. And I'll tell you why. The graphs, I have PowerPoint presentations sometimes. I may put some groups to sleep, but I have some PowerPoint presentations, and in one of those I have a slide, and it shows the costs of nuclear, the costs of coal, the costs of natural gas. On all the slides, solar and wind is like this. So the trajectory for solar and wind cost is on the downward spiral and is already cheaper than coal, which means when we pair solar with batteries for the base load stuff, we will eventually be able to take offline exactly what we have now, the coal and the natural gas plants, but we'll also be able to take off the nuclear. It isn't an either or. We can take out the coal plants with other sources, efficiency being one, because we don't have to always have new production. Energy consumption in Georgia has flatlined over the last 8 years. That's amazing. And we can continue that trend. We can accelerate it if we're smart. It's been my business of 20 years. I know how to reduce energy consumption. That's not new production. That doesn't require expensive plants.
That's all the time we have for questions for each candidate. Now we'll have 60 seconds for a closing statement. Noel, you get the first closing statement.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, panelists. And thank you. And thank you to the Atlanta Press Club. And thank you, streaming today, who care about the energy and environmental future. Ultimately, this race will boil down to one thing: electability. I've spent the last year doing what my opponent has not, traveling the state. Not a few metro counties, the whole state, Valdosta to Vidalia, Terrell County to Towns County. I'm off to Peach County this afternoon. The thing I've learned is that people are mad. They're mad about their high utility bills. They're mad at a crooked and rigged system that is against them. Our rural friends know Metro Atlanta has high-speed internet. Why don't they? We know the system is broken and we want to fix it. We want a champion who will fight against the establishment. We want an experienced fighter who will lower their power bills. And we want a Democrat who can win in November. I'm asking for your vote to do just that.
And Lindy Miller, it's your turn for a closing statement.
I say may the best woman win. So a couple of months ago, I met a woman named Alexis in Rome, Georgia. And if you're listening, thank you, because you drove home to me how badly our system is broken, that our leaders are not listening. And I will tell you, I am not an expert in everything that the commission covers or we've talked about, but I know what I'm good at. I'm good at listening. I'm good at asking questions, and I am really good at standing up when I see something is wrong. I also know how to connect the dots. This is a seat about growth. It's a seat about bills and jobs and the environment and about access and voice, and mostly, this is a seat about social justice. Are the decisions that we are making bringing everyone up, or are we leaving people behind? Are they in special interests or in your interest? Vote for me and I will fight for you, I will listen to you, and I will be accountable to you. I say chuck him out. It's Miller time.
That concludes our debate. We'd like to remind voters that the primary election will be held on Tuesday, May 22nd, and early voting has already begun. Our thanks to the candidates and to our panel of journalists. We'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club for arranging today's debate. For more information about the Atlanta Press Club and all the debates they will host this primary election season, visit atlantapressclub.org. This debate will be archived there and on Georgia Public Broadcasting's website, gpb.org. I'm Drew Dawson. Thanks for joining us for the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series.